Since we're getting pretty close to 100 subscribers, I've got an idea for a special video to celebrate that milestone. I've been meaning to redraw my very first piece of digital art, and once we hit 100 subscribers, I'll be sure to do so.
Well, yeah, we hit 100 subscribers. Only took me, what, 6 or 7 months? But in all seriousness, thank you guys so much for the support you've shown for these silly little videos. Especially for my previous video with Flynn Rainridge. That one was way more successful than most of my other videos, and it made me so happy seeing it all unfold. And hey, if you like that video with Flynn, I'm sure you'll like this subscriber milestone video too. I've already given a full redesign to the sport of my creative skills from 3 years ago, so why not go back even further? To 4 years ago. Because that was when I drew my first piece of digital art. I was very new to it all. I just downloaded Krita, I'd just gotten my Huey on Canvas tablet, which cost £200 by the way, and I really didn't know what I was doing. So I was kind of just doing a bunch of experimenting and seeing how things would turn out. For this first piece of digital art, I decided I was going to draw Corrin from Fire Emblem Fates. Because I love Fire Emblem Fates. I know it's a hot mess, but I genuinely really enjoy that game. And I'm a big fan of Corrin's designs, so why not? Let's see what I was able to... Oh. That sure is art that I drew in 2019. A lot has changed since then, and I would like to formally apologise for drawing Corrin with soulless eyes, and these weird messy arms, a sword that's clearly way too small. Also, why did I draw his nose like that? I must have channeled that one art class from back when I was 7 years old. But you guys know me. On this channel, we don't just bash things we don't like. That's why I'm going to redraw this old art, give you guys a rundown on what's changed, and maybe also reflect a bit on my artistic journey? We'll see. Okay, let's go. Okay, so we're going to start this out with the usual sketch, putting the pose and stuff together and all. That's something I didn't do back when I started. I just went straight for line art first. It actually took me a while to break out of that bad habit. You see, a couple of months after I started drawing with my drawing tablet, my old computer actually broke down. And I guess I thought that the drawing tablet was part of the problem? That was a theory from my uncle, and while he's definitely got experience with making and repairing computers, I'm pretty sure he'd never seen a drawing tablet before, so yeah. But I guess 17-year-old Mira believed it, because he didn't touch his drawing tablet for 2 years afterwards. The result is that I spent 2 years drawing solely with a mouse, which is quite a lot slower than drawing with a tablet pen. So as a result, I never did a sketch layer before the line art in an attempt to save time. And don't get the wrong idea, I'm not going to say that you need a drawing tablet to be a digital artist. It did really help my drawing speed and line art accuracy, but again, my Huey on cost £200. That's a lot of money to spend, even if it is for something that'll help over a long term. I would definitely recommend a drawing tablet if you can get one, but if you can't, that's fine too. You're still a digital artist. I know I've not really talked about it much on my channel, but one of my core values as an artist is wanting to be inclusive and supportive. Everyone's on different stages of their art journey, and everyone's personal journey takes a different path. There are a lot of artists out there who are creating really cool and well-drawn stuff at the age of 16, whereas when I was 16, well yeah, my art looked like that. But remember, I started late with my art, really late. I've only been taking my art seriously for 4 or 5 years, and in general I'm really happy with my improvement. But there's certainly still stuff to improve. Some of which I'll get a bit more into later, but we'll get there. Now one thing that turned out to be a persistent struggle for most of this speed paint would be Corrin's face. Most notably, the shape of his eyes. Corrin has these narrow, serious looking eyes, but they also have quite a soft shape to them. Overall, his eyes do a good job at reflecting his personality. Actually, in general, I really like the way that Yusuke Kosaki draws eyes. I really like the variety of eye shapes he uses to make his characters more distinct and convey their personality at first glance. I definitely want to do a study on Kozaki's style and how he draws eyes, because I think I fall into same face syndrome fairly often. Like, I do know a few tricks with my character's eye shapes, but on the whole, I do tend to give up and default to my usual pointy anime eyes. And I think that's exactly what happened with Corrin here. Oh well, at least I know what to improve on now. On a more positive note, one thing I definitely think I've gotten better at lately is the ability to translate details. Fire Emblem designs tend to be very detailed on the whole, and I've always found it really difficult to implement all of those details whenever I draw fan art. My art style is very stylized and the characters tend to be on the short and skinny side, so that gives me a lot less space to work with when it comes to fitting in all the details, and often I just try to force it to make it work. Though this time, while I tried to keep as much of the detail as I was comfortable with, I decided to take small liberties whenever possible, so that the details would fit better with my art style and proportions and all that. Like with those black segments on the torso piece, the original design has 3 of them and the shapes are more spread out, but I purposefully went with 2 instead because of the way I draw proportions. There just wasn't enough space to fit 3. One thing I wish I did differently with this art was the pose. I didn't hate the pose that I came up with, what with one arm holding a sword and the other arm out to the side, but I think I would have liked the piece more if I committed to my original pose idea, where he's holding a sword down in both hands. That was meant to be a reference to Corrin's pose in the 4 Coma art book. If I went with that pose idea, I also would have liked to have Corrin stare off in the distance rather than look determinedly at the camera. I think that would have been more in character for him. I also think that the pose I did go with wasn't executed as good as it could have been. I probably should have pushed the pose weight some more. That is, moved the position of the legs to imply that he's leaning on his sword. I think the reason why I didn't push for this was because the art cuts off Corrin's feet, so I wasn't considering their position as much as I could have. But oh well, we got the piece we got. Maybe I'll redraw it again in another 4 years, who knows? Okay, that's the sketch all done. Next up is the line art, except I goofed up really bad and lost a huge chunk of my recording. So for context, I do all of my video recording using OBS Studio, but aside from using it to record video footage for my Speedpaints, I also use it to record audio so I can get the music that I use in the background of my videos. Whenever I'm recording audio, I set audio output capture to on and video capture to off, and when I'm recording a Speedpaint, I do the opposite. But when I sat down to record the second part of this Speedpaint, I completely forgot to change the settings from when I had last recorded audio. So the end result was 3 whole hours of the music I was listening to that day, with none of the footage of me drawing. But thankfully, I do still have still images of the line art colouring and shading phases, so I can just show them all individually and narrate my thoughts. It's no replacement for the Speedpaint footage, but it's the best I can do. Okay, so let's start with the line art. Just going over the sketch to make it cleaner. Because I was drawing a character more zoomed in than I normally do, I had to use a thicker line art pen to compensate. Now that the line art's all done, we move on to the colours. And the way I apply colours has definitely changed in the past 4 years. Back then, I would mostly just colour pick the colours from whatever character I'm referencing, except for the cape, which I made super saturated for some reason. Nowadays, I make more of my own choice with the colours, which definitely helps give my art more of its own identity. And for this specific art, I actually did something a bit different with how I coloured Corrin's irises. Normally when I render eyes, I had a dark gradient to the top and a light gradient to the bottom, but this time, I just had the dark gradient at the top. I initially wanted to try and replicate Kazaki's eye style, but it just looked too plain in my art style, where the eyes are a lot bigger. This was an interesting experiment, but I definitely think I'll be sticking to my usual double gradient eyes. And now we get to the shading. Hey, that's something I never did in my early art days. Now for this particular piece, I decided to do some soft shading with a lighter rim. But this time, I did something a bit different, and I made the rims of the shadows a lot more saturated. I didn't really like how this effect turned out on the cape, but I think it looks good on the hair. I think I'll want to try this kind of shading again in the future, though it could definitely use a bit more experimentation. And then after the shading, I also added some lighting. For both the shading and lighting, I didn't use any fancy layer types like multiply or linear burn. I just used regular layers set to 50% opacity. I find that it's a lot easier for me to apply the colours I want this way. And with that, we finally made it out of the no footage zone. Thankfully, I did not goof up the rest of this recording, so you actually get to see how I made the background. I know that most of my backgrounds are pretty low effort for the most part, but this speed paint's definitely an exception. I guess I wanted to make up for losing all that footage by giving you a treat with a background. I mean, this is a subscriber milestone special, only makes sense. So as much as I don't look back fondly on the original art that I'm redrawing, it was kind of a first of its kind, and that's because of the background. Since it was my first Krita piece in general, I wanted to try out a bunch of different brushes to make all of the background elements, and I remember that being the most fun part of this piece. but when it comes to being an actual scene, it doesn't really deliver. Now, I had a pretty strong idea for what I wanted to do with this background. I was very inspired by this Corrin art from Cypher, the Fire Emblem trading card game, drawn by Sayori Toyota. And if you're wondering why I'm giving proper credit to all of these Fire Emblem artists, it's partly because Fire Emblem has brought so many artists on board over the years, and also because I love the art of this series in general. Admittedly, I do think I should have approached this background a bit differently. I have a bad habit of not doing sketches for my backgrounds, and I end up just messing around with brushes and effects and seeing how it all turns out. And while that's fine for simpler backgrounds, it doesn't work so well when you're trying to make a specific concept work, like with this one. So when it came to drawing the cherry blossom trees, I was stumped for a while on how to make it look like it had that texture. What I did was I made this messy, cloudy mix of various shades of pink, then used a leaf pattern brush to make the shape of petals. Then after that, I highlighted the shape of the petals and copy-pasted that space in the pink layer. After that though, I did spend quite a bit of time struggling to get the arrangement of the petals right. In the end, I made a few duplicates of the petal layer, I shrunk them down and put them behind the main petals in order to reduce the empty space. And then I made a row of even smaller petals underneath the pattern and changed their colour, so I could create the illusion of tree trunks. In hindsight, that illusion didn't really work, and I probably should have changed the colour of the trunk petals more. I also redrew the grass, because I decided to change which brush to use to make the grass texture. I also changed the grass colour to be more of a cool shade, so that it felt more like mirror-coloured grass. And then I figured it was time to add some lighting to the grass. And I went kinda crazy here. I ended up making 5 different layers of lighting and shading, and kind of just messed around with each one, trying different colours and layer styles each time. Like I said, I tend to be fast and loose whenever I'm painting backgrounds. After the highlights on the grass, I decided to add some more light highlights to Corrin himself, to add a bit more visual interest. And then I figured, why not? Since I'm making this piece all pretty and rendery, let's give him some coloured outlines to complete the look. I don't do this very often, usually I just save coloured outlines for details to separate them from the outlines. I don't normally do full coloured outlines because they can be kind of tedious to put together, and I don't think they always work well with my art style, though of course it depends on the piece and the shading I choose. In this case though, I think the coloured outlines fit in nicely with the style of the background. If you're wondering how I'm colouring the outlines, I do it by clicking this checkerboard button on the top of the Krita interface. Once it's turned on, it'll have a padlock over the top, and then you can apply colours on top of anything that already exists on that layer. It makes recolouring a whole lot quicker and cleaner. So after finishing coloured outlines, I tweaked the colours on the cherry blossoms to give an impression of light and shadow. Then I added these sun streams over the top of the art, as another reference to the Cypher art that this is based on. And with that, the redraw is complete! So let's take a look at the finished result. So here's how our final art turned out. And to be honest, I don't think it's one of my favourite pieces I've ever drawn. I've mentioned my gripes throughout the video, but the main one is that I think I should have done a different pose, one that reflects Corrin's personality better. Though overall, when you look back at the original art this was based on, it really is a massive improvement. Again, that original piece was the first piece of digital art I drew in general, so this basically reflects my entire art journey so far. And hey, even with my gripes on this new piece, I still think it reflects a lot of the things that I've really improved on since then. The improvement in colours and rendering is definitely reflected well. The anatomy too. Back then I straight up didn't know how to structure a body, but nowadays I have a much stronger style with intentional stylization. And I know I just complained about the pose in this new art, but it's still miles better than what I drew in that original art. He straight up looks like he's stabbing himself in the foot. But anyway, thanks for joining me on another trip down artistic memory lane. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Instagram for more of my art. And again, thank you guys so much for getting this channel to 100 subscribers. It's a really small milestone, but here's hoping we can get even higher before the end of the year. Okay, that's all I wanted to say here. My next video remains completely undecided. Though maybe I'll take a bit of a break to focus more on non-video art. I I've been meaning to alter my video making schedule so I can give myself more breaks to draw, so future uploads may become a bit less frequent, but we'll see. But anyway, stay hopeful, don't give up on your dreams, definitely consider doing redraws of your old art, and I'll see you all next time!